Today we're talking about adrenal fatigue. And the question is that I have for many of you is, are you one of those people that's tired all the time? Like no matter how much sleep, you're dragging. Or maybe you wake up okay, but then in the afternoon you hit a wall. Do you have to pump yourself up with caffeine or snacks to get through the day? Or are you one of those people that after a workout, you're like so exhausted? Everyone else is like on this post-workout high. Like you need to take a nap after you work out, or after you work out, you can't think of working out for like 3 days because you need to recover. Now, are you one of those people who've been told over and over again that there's nothing wrong with you, but you still feel so exhausted? Well, if any of these things describes you, it's time to consider the diagnosis of adrenal fatigue. So today we're going to talk about what it is, how to know if you have it, and of course, how to treat it. But as always, I'd like to let you guys know how to reach me and my team. We're called The New Method. New is spelled with a K, because you always knew there was a better way. And we're everywhere. TikTok, Facebook, Instagram, you name it, we're on it. And wherever you are, if you send us a private message, we will answer you. If you're listening to this on YouTube, don't forget to like and subscribe. It makes a really big difference for us. And if you are listening on the podcast, I'm wearing a sweatshirt today. So let's have fun. Before I go into what adrenal fatigue is, because you know I always like to start with definitions, I want to put in a little warning here. And here's the warning. If you're tired all the time, the very first step you have to take is to go to your PCP. Get the blood work. Your PCP should evaluate you for anything like anemia or thyroid issues or anything really significant. You have to do that part first. Never ever skip that part. And you should only consider the diagnosis of adrenal fatigue after you did this part. If everything else comes back negative, there's no anemia, your thyroid's on point, then you can start thinking about adrenal fatigue as a diagnosis, okay? But don't go there first. Never skip that step. So adrenal fatigue obviously has to do with your adrenal glands. So what are adrenal glands? There's these small triangular shaped glands on top on both of your kidneys, and they produce hormones that help regulate your metabolism. They help you respond to stress. They help with your blood pressure. They help with your immune system. So they're kind of super important. And one of the most important hormones that many of us are familiar with is cortisol. Now, cortisol is a steroid hormone that helps with a lot of things. Most of us are familiar with it when we talk about stress. Oh, I'm stressed out. My cortisol must be up, right? That's something that we say a lot. And when you're stressed, it's true. These glands pump out lots of cortisol and adrenaline to help you through the stressful event. You know the story. A mom sees her kid in danger. She suddenly gets this immense energy to like speed to get her child out of danger or lift something really heavy, something that she probably couldn't do on a regular day. That's your adrenals pumping out cortisol and adrenaline. But cortisol is much more than that. Here's just a small little list of the things that cortisol does. Immune system regulation. Cortisol is anti-inflammatory. It helps regulate the immune response. Metabolism. It influences how you metabolize carbs, proteins, fat. Bone health. It really makes a difference on if your bones lead to osteoporosis or not. Brain function influences memory, mood, cognitive function. Blood sugar regulation. Cortisol helps regulate blood sugar. Salt and water balance. And cortisol is also converted into hormones. You would not have hormones, any of the sex hormones, if you didn't have cortisol. And you know what else it does? It's also part of your sleep-wake cycle. This is important here. It's in charge, because we're always thinking, oh, cortisol is stress. It has a lot of really important jobs. It's in charge of waking you up in the morning. So cortisol is supposed to be very high in the morning and then melatonin at night. And when everything works well, the body starts to release this cortisol in the morning, kind of waking you up naturally. Imagine that. And then as you start to wake up, and then as the day goes by, the cortisol starts to gradually decline until it's time to go to sleep. And then cortisol is at its lowest, and that's when melatonin takes over. So that's the perfect cortisol rhythm. We're going to talk about more of that in a moment. High in the morning and low at night. So cortisol has so many jobs. And when everything is fine, when we don't have a lot of stress, the adrenals are busy doing their jobs, regulating hormones, managing our blood pressure, making sure our sleep-wake cycle is okay, and our energy levels are okay. But what happens when we're stressed? I think of it like a bag of flour. I don't know why I thought of this metaphor this morning. I don't even bake, but maybe it's because Thanksgiving's around the corner, but we're going with a bag of flour. So you're going to bake these things, and you have one bag of flour, and you can use the flours to make cookies or bread, crackers, but you need to make all of them. Now, if somebody comes in and takes a big chunk of your flour and they say, hey, I'm going to go make a huge loaf of bread. Now you have very little flour left, and you still have to make all these other food items. So you're going to do with less. You're going to make smaller cookies and smaller bread, right? Again, I have no idea why I went with the baking metaphor, but it is where it is right now. So that's how it is with cortisol stores. If you're using a big chunk of your cortisol for your stress, because you're super stressed out, you don't have enough for all the other jobs I just talked about. including your sleep-wake cycle. So your energy levels are going to be affected. Now, the reality is that most of us are really stressed. It's the way we live our life. Our current lifestyle is a constant state of stress. So your cortisol is constantly diverted to stress instead of all its other jobs. Now, initially, this is really great. In the first few years of stress, your adrenals are pumping out cortisol so you can feel like you're ready to go at all times. Remember those days when you just got it all done? There was nothing that stood in your way. A lot of my patients will say, there was a time where I could just go, 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 go. That's when your adrenals were pumping out. They were looking good. Nothing can stop you. But what do you think happens after a few years of this constant go, go, go? Your adrenals start saying, hi, you're using a little bit too much of this. I'm going to need you to slow it down because I cannot keep producing. But you have to keep going. So you start overdrawing on your cortisol credit and the funds start running out. So you start running on credit and you start running out on gas. That's adrenal fatigue. I'm going to show you some graphs in a moment of what this looks like. But before I do that, I want to let you know this. A lot of doctors and providers don't believe in adrenal fatigue. So I want to equip you with that because if you run to your endocrinologist and say, I just met with E or my other functional medicine provider, and she told me I have adrenal fatigue, I'm going to let you know that they're going to roll their eyes. And that's okay. We're not here to convince anyone. I just don't want you to be upset by their reaction. The same is true for leaky gut. So many GI docs don't even believe in leaky gut. And that's okay. In the medical world, your adrenals are either totally fine or totally bad. And you're making too much, like in something called Cushing's, or too low, called Addison's, but there seems to be nothing in between. They will not acknowledge that there's anything in between. And like I said, that's okay. This talk is not for them. We're not here to try to convince anyone of anything. This is called the new method because you always know, and you know what you know. I used to be one of those people who really didn't see what was right in front of me, and now I am like chin deep, maybe eyeball deep in the vortex. It is what it is. I just like to let people know that so they don't have a bad reaction or a bad interaction when they go to their medical provider. Now, as I said earlier, I always caution you against self-diagnosis. So a lot of the symptoms we discussed today can also be signs of other diseases. So make sure you go to your PCP, get fully evaluated. But if they rule everything out, they say everything is fine and it's kind of in your head, that's all good. That's when it's time for us to consider the diagnosis of adrenal fatigue. So the next question is always, well, how do I know if I have adrenal fatigue? Let's talk about some of the symptoms. So the symptoms of adrenal fatigue are fatigue. Even when you have a full night's sleep, you are fatigued. But at the same time, you might have difficulty getting to sleep, difficulty waking up, sugar cravings, salt cravings, lack of motivation. Yeah, people are going to think you're lazy, brain fog, afternoon crashes, decreased libido, increased irritability. The other classic sign of adrenal fatigue is that after a workout, you are wiped out. Everyone else feels great and they're going on with their day and you need a nap. These are all classic signs of adrenal fatigue. And of course, these symptoms can have a significant impact on your day-to-day life. They can make it difficult to go through the day, let alone do our jobs or maintain relationships. But the good news is that there are so many things that we can do to address adrenal fatigue, which we'll get to in a moment. But I want to let you know that getting out of adrenal fatigue is not just about getting your energy back. You're going to see what I'm talking about. It's about making sure you optimize your health. Remember that you have a limited supply of cortisol. And if you're constantly asking your adrenals to keep pumping cortisol and divert it to managing stress, it focuses on your stress and doesn't focus on healing and immunity repair. Remember all the other jobs I told you that cortisol has in your body, right? It has to do with immunity and inflammation and all of these things. When I talk about fixing adrenal fatigue, it's not just about getting your energy back. It's allowing your body and your cortisol to start focusing on some of these other things that it's supposed to do. So when we're talking about fixing adrenal fatigue, it's not just about energy. It's about fixing your overall health and increasing longevity. How do you test for it? The preferred method is a saliva test. There is a way to test for cortisol through blood. Your PCP, your endocrinologist might check your cortisol through blood, but there's a few problems with the blood test. Number one, it tends to be one test, an early morning blood test. And this test is only good if you're looking for the extreme case in the morning, like that extreme one that I told you about, Cushing's or Addison. But it won't give you a picture of what's going on through the day. And the other problem with blood testing is that because it's so painful, you have a needle in your arm, you have this natural cortisol surge in that moment, which can actually mess with the results. So we prefer to do a saliva testing, and there's two tests out there. There's a 4-point test and a 6-point test. I use the 4-point test, and I'm going to show you what the results look like. For those of you listening and not watching, don't worry. I'm going to describe it so you can visualize it as you mow your lawn. So the point of collecting the saliva is so that you can tell how your cortisol is doing all day. not just first thing in the morning when you're in the exam room getting that blood test. You want to see your levels when you first wake up, after lunch, right before dinner, at bedtime, and graph it out so you could see what's happening to you during the day, right? So think about it. Some of you might be fine in the morning, but you might have great energy in the morning, then a sudden drop in the afternoon. It would be great to be able to see that, right? Or some of you might be dragging all day, and then right before bedtime, you get a crazy surge, and then you have trouble sleeping. Being able to see that on a graph really, really can help impact you. Or maybe you're exhausted all day long and there's actually no difference in your energy when you first wake up and when you go to sleep. It would be nice to see that on a graph as well. It is amazing to see people when they first go over the graph because they realize they're looking at it for the first time ever. And they're like, oh my God, this is exactly what I feel like. And they see their pattern on the graph. And for some people, this is such a moment of validation. They're not crazy. They're not lazy. They have adrenal fatigue. And sometimes it gets really emotional. So if you can get tested, it is a great moment. See that you're not crazy. You're not crazy. So let's go over the 4 main possible results that you might get from this test. And there are some variation, but this is generally speaking. Okay, so let me just share the screen here. So this one right here is what we call a stage 0. Okay, stage 0 is what you want to be. It's what you want to look like. So for those of you who are listening who don't have access, I'm going to tell you what it looks like. I want you to think of it like a half moon curve, and the cortisol levels are nice and high in the AM, and you get up feeling refreshed and ready to go. And then throughout the day, you have a consistent downward slope, like appropriately, because you're supposed to get tired as the day goes by. No severe, just a nice low curve decline until you're ready to go to bed, at which point your cortisol is nice and low and you have no trouble sleeping. Most of you listening to this are actually laughing and saying, okay, imagine feeling this great. Imagine having energy in the morning and then slowly getting tired during the day. Most people don't feel this way. So stage 0 means that all 4 of the saliva collections, all 4 points are where they should be. They should be in this green kind of half moon curve, okay? The next one we're going to talk about is stage 1. So adrenal fatigue is stage 1. This is when you start to overdraw a little bit on your cortisol bank account, but you're not bankrupt yet. So you're not feeling terrible, but you're going to have some moments of brain fog or anxiety, but it's not debilitating yet. You're just a little off. Most of the day, your cortisol levels are fine. Think of that half moon again. If you're being in the green, so most of the time you're fine, but you're going to have this one point where it's a little low. So in this particular example, you see that the morning they wake up fine, and then at noon, they really dip below that green line, and then they go back to normal. This is somebody who's going to be really fatigued either right before lunch or right after lunch. That's stage 1, okay? So this patient is going to feel tired around lunch, but then they're going to bounce back. They're going to go back to that baseline. This is, the phase 1 patient doesn't usually come to the office presenting a fatigue. They might have other issues, but fatigue is not usually the thing they complain about all the time. So likely if you're here complaining of fatigue, you're likely not a phase 1. Let's look at what phase 2 looks like. So this is phase 2. A phase 2 patient is underperforming all day. They still have a little bit more in the morning than they do at night, but they're dragging all day. This person is not completely depleted, but feels tired and suboptimal all day long. If this is you, you might reach out for pick-me-ups all day, like coffee and snacks. You might notice that you have increased anxiety or irritability later on, or increased fatigue. You might have trouble losing weight. Sometimes you might have trouble falling asleep or getting a good night's sleep because your cortisol is coming up and down at the wrong time. So stage 2 looks like they still have a curve, as I said. The morning is still better, but the entire day is below where it should be. It's all below the green line. For those of you who are imagining it, you have the half moon where it's supposed to be, and this line is right under that half moon. So it's tracing. It looks kind of like it, but it's not there. Now, most of you who come to me are actually in the worst phase, which is the phase 3. This is what phase 3 looks like. The phase 3 patient is completely exhausted. You lose the curve completely. You don't even have a morning rise. You wake up exhausted, you go to bed exhausted, you could sleep for hours, and you still wake up exhausted. If this sounds like you, this is probably your graph. It looks like this. So if you're a phase 3, again, this is why you feel worse after exercise, because you have nothing. Take a look at this graph. You have no reserves, right? You have no gas, and then you go to CrossFit or to work out, and you come back and you have even less than 0. This is why when people are super well-meaning, they're just exercise, you're going to feel better. And you try, but you can't function after. It's not because you're lazy, not because you're crazy. It's because you don't have any gas left, and you're pushing yourself to exercise, and it actually makes things worse. This is what that looks like. So the question is now, all right, I get it. There's a test for it. I see it. I could see if I'm 1, 2, or 3, or 4. But what do, right? You're telling me it's from stress. And if it's stress, my life is really stressful. I have a stressful job. I go to school. I take care of my parents, take care of my kids. Like, what am I supposed to do? I can't control all of that. And the answer is, that's true. You can't control all your stressors. But there are some stressors in your life that you can. And you may not even consider them as stress. Let me tell you what I mean. I'm going to go through a list of some things that are stressful, but you might not consider it. And those are the things you absolutely can control, while the things you can't control, your job or the kids or the parents, you give you more resiliency to manage that. So let's talk about stressors that we can control. Because remember, stress on the body is not just emotional. It's not just I feel stress. It's also physical. So if you're asking your body to constantly work hard, that's a stressor. So as always, we have to begin with nutrition. If you're feeding your body the standard American diet, you are bombarding it with nonsense. And this nonsense, your body has to spend time detoxing and processing. So this is a stressor. If your foods are full of chemicals and preservatives, your body has to work to get rid of that. That's a stressor. And it's a stressor that you can control. Give your body a break. It's bad enough it has to deal with your crazy schedule. Why add another stress to it by feeding it stuff like, that it needs to contend with instead of stuff that could actually help it? Next is your belly. Okay, it's not just about removing these chemicals I just talked about, but if you're eating something and your belly is bloated and uncomfortable, that's inflammation. That inflammation is another stressor on your body. One more thing it needs to contend with. So you're in pain after every meal because you refuse to let go of the latte and you're lactose intolerant, or you eat the fried foods that gives you reflux and you're like, whatever, I just really like it. Understand that that's a stressor. Your body has to spend valuable time dealing with that stressor in order to get rid of it. And remember, any additional stressor is taking away from your limited supply of cortisol. And instead of using cortisol for some of the good stuff, metabolism, hormones, it's wasting its time dealing with the stressors. If the food you're eating is causing disease, right? Your carbs are causing diabetes, your sodium is giving you high blood pressure, your body, again, is going to work hard to deal with all of that. And if you're on medications, guess what? That's a stressor too. So you want to work on reversing the diseases so that your body doesn't have to work so hard. Sleep. You have to get lots of sleep. Lack of sleep is a stressor on the body. If you haven't watched my episode on sleep, go back and watch it, because lack of sleep causes disease. It forces you into stress mode. And by not getting enough sleep, your cortisol levels get all messed up and your adrenal glands have to work overtime. The more sleep you have, the more it reduces your cortisol and stabilizes you. And I know some of you have trouble sleeping, which is why I want you to watch the episode on sleep. But there are so many things that you can do you probably haven't tried. So hear me out. There are some basics that a lot of people overlook when they have trouble sleeping. And again, I go into in that episode, but like a quick recap. Here's the thing. If your diet stinks during the day, your sleep is not going to be good at night. If you have a nice heavy meal at the end of the day with a glass of wine, thinking that this is a well-deserved meal after a hard day, guess what? You're not going to sleep. You're going to toss and turn as your body tries to manage this huge influx of food and carbs and alcohol right before bedtime. If you had Starbucks at 4 p.m. to get you through the last part of your shift, you won't sleep. Because just because you're ready to go to bed doesn't mean your body is done processing the caramel latte, double shot espresso you had. So you have to really be aware of what's happening during the day so that you could sleep better at night. On the other hand, eating a light dinner at least 3 hours before bedtime that is low carb without alcohol will help you sleep better. So no caffeine after 12 is really what you want to go for if you have sleeping issues. Exercising. Exercising also helps normalize the blood of the body's cortisol. And when you exercise in the morning, again, if you can, it starts to let your brain know to get ready for sleep later on. So the point is, you just want to really focus your efforts on getting your sleep right because it's a stressor that you can control so that your body doesn't have to deal with it. Let's move on to some supplements. Everyone loves talking about some supplements. There are so many important supplements, but there are some supplements that are really specific to adrenals. So first, let's start with the basics. Vitamin C, vitamin B, magnesium, vitamin D, omega-3. That should be on everyone's list, but definitely anyone dealing with adrenals. Okay, and then there are two specific supplements that are really well known to help adrenals. One is called adaptogens. Adaptogens are an herb that helps the body adapt to stress. Think ashwagandha, rhodiola. These are known adaptogens. And then there's a type called glandulars. These are glandulars they're taking from the adrenal glands of animals, and that is supposed to help with our adrenal glands to help us. Adding these supplements to your list that are specific for adrenals can really make a difference. My clients will often say that their energy level goes up much higher once they take adrenal supplements. And you know when they notice it the most? When they run out. When they run out, they're like, oh my God, I really just thought I just had my energy like all on my own. And they realize the supplements really make such a difference. Consider using some supplements. It's really hard to get everything just from food. We want to do it, but supplements really help as long as your nutrition is right. So let's do a quick recap. If you're experiencing any of the symptoms that we talked about with adrenal fatigue, the tiredness, the post-exercise fatigue, tired no matter how much you sleep, here's what you do. First, go to your PCP, right? Never ever skip that step, never self-diagnose. And when they tell you you're fine, that's great news. Your next step is to work with us or another functional medicine provider to get tested and find out what phase of adrenal fatigue you're in. Once you have that, first of all, you're going to realize you're not crazy, and then you're going to fix it. Remember that flower analogy I gave you? The way to fix it is to help your body stop diverting all its attention to deal with stress. And we do that by decreasing the amount of things we ask our body to manage. We're going to eliminate the bad foods. We're going to eliminate the bad habits that make your body work so hard, because all of that worsens your adrenal fatigue. You're going to work on fixing the chronic aches and the pains and the illnesses because it's depleting you and causing more adrenal fatigue. Of course, you're going to add some supplements to give your body the support it needs. And no, it's not an easy, quick fix. You can't fix adrenal fatigue overnight, but it is possible to fix. As always, if you want to find out how to work with me and my team, just reach out to The New Method on any platform. Don't forget the new is spelled with a K. But whether you decide to work with us or not, I hope this video helped you, because I'm glad that you're here. Why? Because you always knew there's a better way. I'll see you guys next week.